Hey, this is Web3 Talks. The rule of this podcast is simple. We only talk with people who have hands-on Web3 building experience. So if you are a hacker, entrepreneur, or investor, you can get inspired by their stories, lessons, and fuck-ups. My name is Mac, and I'm hosting this pod. If you want to stay in touch, go to twitter.com/Web3Talks, click the link in the pinned tweet, and join our Discord community. Let's go. Today's guest is Seb Audet, CEO and co-founder of Zapper. This is one of the most popular crypto apps. It's used by over 1 million people, which for crypto is an amazing number. And, we all know Zapper from their dashboard, where we track how much money have we lost on NFTs or how much money have we made on our investments. But, now Zapper goes to version number 2. And apart from tracking portfolio, bridging tokens and exchanging them, it starts to be more like an Web3 exploration tool where you can find the interesting DAOs, DeFi projects, NFTs, and track people's wallets and, get some hint what you might trade or, what smart money does or your friends. So this is very cool. I had a pleasure to check out this beta version and it looks amazing. So it's really, really good. So there's a lot to unfold here. So let's start with a warm-up. So Seb, I know that you discovered Ethereum in 2017. How did you get so deep into crypto? Because you get as deep as it gets.
Yeah, well, first, thank you very much for having me. It's been a while since I did a podcast, since we've been really heads down building our V2. So for my journey in crypto, Ethereum in particular, so I have a background in finance. I studied in finance, but quickly became disillusioned by it. I thought it was very boring and the industry was kind of I don't know, it felt dirty in a way. I've always considered myself to be a creative person that always liked to build. I loved doing Legos when I was young. Anyways, I've always considered myself to be a builder. And so when I graduated, started hacking stuff, building, learning how to code, and got a job as a developer. And it's in 2017 when I learned about Ethereum that I was kind of blown away. I knew what Bitcoin was, but I didn't gravitate towards it because I couldn't build anything on top of it. I understand its value and everything, but from a builder perspective, it wasn't super attractive to me. And Ethereum kind of was interesting to me because of kind of the mix of my finance background and then software. I saw it solve a lot of things that, were problems in traditional finance. And so I'd say pretty early on, I got pretty interested in everything that revolved around DeFi, even when it wasn't really called DeFi. In 2019, end of 2018, early 2019, I became very interested in DeFi. I don't even think it was called DeFi at the time, back in the day, or it just started. And in the summer, that's where I kind of started to play around and test, different DeFi apps, put $5 here, $10 there. And I don't know, it was just a magical moment for me, kind of how, a lot of people that tried out Uniswap had this magical moment the first time they tried it. Or today, a lot of people that are buying their first NFT have kind of magical moment. And then from there kind of started being obsessed and started investing in a bunch of different things, playing around with a bunch of DeFi apps, and kind of stumbled on my first problem in DeFi, which was tracking all my assets. It really felt like you put your money in a black box. It was there on chain somewhere, but there was no interface that allowed you to see everything at the same spot. And so that kind of was the seed for the idea of building Zapper.
I know that you have tested it very early. I mean, you put out a pretty raw version on, I don't remember whether it was a forum or a Telegram group. Could you tell us about the first days?
So the first use case of Zapper was I was invested in Synthetix and Uniswap. And it was kind of the first yield farm. So there was a synthetic ETH pool that gave you SNX tokens when you pooled them on Uniswap and staked them. And so I had this, it was I'd say the first yield farm and leveraging the composability of DeFi. And so I noticed that a lot of people in Discord also had that problem. So I was like, oh, this is like a perfect use case to start. Because it's like for a lot of people, it sounds like a mildly annoying problem. But for like hardcore users, it was like everyone is kind of calculating either impermanent loss or like calculating how much they had in the pool. And so the first use case was just Zapper had two protocols integrated, was Uniswap and Synthetix. And because of that, like shared, composable pool between them, it was kind of an interesting use case as well. And then I just shared the link in the Synthetix Discord. And from there, it kind of was like, oh, that's really cool, like neat interface. Could you add Compound? And then so I built Compound. And then people from Compound were happy. They shared it on Twitter. And then then Aave reached out. Oh, could you add Aave? And then, yeah, sure, I'll add Aave. And then Curve. And then it kind of, snowballed to, where it is today.
Yeah, perfect. And like, what were the biggest obstacles and users' concerns when you started? What was the hardest thing back then?
Just getting stuff on chain. There wasn't any, before Zapper, like I had to kind of like reverse engineer how to fetch stuff on chain. Like right now, it sounds trivial, but at the time, there's no really like real resource to figure stuff out. Like I remember having to, going on the Compound website, and then I had no idea how to get like the claimable comp that would show on the dashboard. And so I had to look at the Infura calls, like the data that was called to a node, and like analyze and see what kind of was requested, and then pull that out to figure out which function was used to call that and on which smart contract. So like all these things, they're like really hard to do. Now you have a bunch of tools that allow you to easily query stuff on chain, but at the time there's like nothing. So you had to like really be some sort of an on-chain detective to kind of understand how a protocol like works under the hood.
Yeah, and like Zapper right now is like a household name. I think like it's total top of mind for crypto portfolio tracking. So I'm wondering like what made you invest in making V2? Because like it's always some risk with changing your product, or like even sometimes adding new features because some people might get confused and so on. So I'm wondering like what made you, go with it?
I'd say it happened quite a while ago, like the path in my mind to V2 itself, like maybe a year and a half ago. Because so we've set Zapper, like what is a product truth that is really easy. Jeff Bezos did this to kind of like set the, people will want fast delivery, cheap, blah, blah, blah. So we were like, what are the things that are true for Zapper's product today and will always be true in the future as well? And for us, the simple truth was that people want to see what's in their wallets. Like that was this simplest truth. We know it's going to be true in 10 years. Like in 10 years, it's not like people like, oh no, I don't want to see what's in my wallet. Like I want to like try to calculate that in Google Sheets on my own. Like we know that's true for sure.
Yeah.
And so when you think about it that way, well, obviously we can't just support DeFi. We can't just, support NFTs. We can't just support like, the DAOs you're a part of. Like, and then you can extrapolate that further, like what's in your wallet. It's not just the tokens you hold, it's also like your reputation, your identity in a way. And so it's kind of like a natural evolution of that. And I think like a shift as well is, I'd say again, like about a year and a half ago, I was surprised to see users describe Zapper as like exploration tool, like to explore other accounts. Like it was very single players, like me and my balances. And so I noticed a lot of people like using it to explore other accounts. And it kind of collided with one thing that I do often. Like I just like to explore on Etherscan and browse like what the hell is going on. And like, I'm really curious. So I kind of end up on like a Wikipedia like journey, but on Etherscan. And I was like, the crypto rabbit hole is like an experience that's very common to people in crypto. Like we kind of all relate to that in some way. And Etherscan didn't feel like the right type of product. Now there's been more products that kind of help you dive deeper in the rabbit hole, but like Etherscan didn't feel like the right product because it's very low level. It's for mostly developers or, people that have been hung out for a while. And so it was, how can we make this, this exploration more accessible to everyone? And so the idea came to like really bring the blockchain closer to people in a language that's more accessible to them. And so making like building it like a Etherscan, a human readable Etherscan. Like obviously humans can read Etherscan right now, but you get the metaphor. And yeah, so that's kind of what happened. It's also turning Zapper more into a multiplayer experience instead of like me and my balances. Again, like another thing we kind of realize is like we aren't building a portfolio tracker, we're building an account profile. And part of your account profile is what you have in your portfolio.
Yeah.
And so that was a big shift in the way we viewed it, because if we go the portfolio tracker route, it can end up being a very different product. And it didn't feel like like we were better equipped to solve making blockchain more accessible and more readable to everyone.
Yeah, like when I played around it, I felt like it's like a trader's social media in a way that you can, follow people and see what they have. And instead of putting out new Twitter threads, you put out new trades or like NFTs, or you join new DAOs. And I felt like it's very interesting because it adds network effects to your product. Because like at some point, I believe people might go to Zapper because they have already a list of people they follow and they like the UI, and they might start the day with checking out what Punk6529 bought today, or like whatever.
Absolutely. One thing like I kind of think about, like if you imagine the blockchain is like the town center. It's where we all go to do our purchases. We go to the store to buy clothes. We go to the bank, do our withdrawal, we loan, but it all happens in the town center. And what's funny is like we all go there, but we don't see each other. We know we're all there doing transactions, but there's no way to like it's like if we kind of like all blind in the town center, and then we end up later at the Twitter bar, and then we talk about what we did during the day. Like it feels really odd. Like we're like at the Twitter bar, and like I'm like, oh, I bought this thing, but you don't really know if it's actually true. Like there's a lot of people that just lie on Twitter or like mislead.
Yeah,
there's like there's a lot of distance between what happens on social media and what actually happens on chain. And even like there's Twitter accounts that have built huge followings on that knowledge gap between what's on chain and what's in Twitter, like say Zach XBT that, exposes people. That's because there's such a huge information gap and knowledge gap between, like I could go on chain, but even then it's hard to know like, oh, you have to like map out all the addresses together and be like, okay, so this person just scammed or did a rug pull, right? But if you had better tools to see what's actually going in the town center, you'd be like, oh yeah, I mean, this person just came out and like grabbed money out of my, wallet directly. But now it kind of happens, but we're all blind, like, oh, money kind of disappeared from my wallet. I don't know who it is, what happened.
Yeah. And then you can like build your reputation. Like your reputation is more important because like, we have like this .eth, obviously like our ENS domains, but I feel like people have multiple wallets typically, like if they are more sophisticated. So you don't care about your reputation on this like main ENS related wallet. But if you could easily track and, lurk into someone's wallet, I think it will be more important to just build your reputation on one wallet that you typically use. Like there was a guy, I don't know if you know him, like guy called Greedy Goblin, ETH. Like this was a guy that like he invested like 200K in DeFi, then he made like 10 million, and then he like, he let people look at his transactions and verify all them on Etherscan. And I think it's like super cool because you really see what this guy has done, and like it makes sense. He won't bullshit you like, oh yeah, I invested in it, but he doesn't hold any of the shitcoin that he promotes. So yeah, I think it's cool.
It's also great for learning about, good investors. You look at what they do, how they do it.
Could you share a little bit like how have you taken care of the UX and design process? Because like this last design was very good, but this V2 design is like very clean and elegant. Like it's super good. I'm wondering like how have you made it happen?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. At Zapper, we're 2 designers. So we have an amazing designer called Jasper who works on mobile, also helps out on web as well. I design a lot as well. I still design a lot. I think we have a weird design process. Like it's not scalable at all. Like I'll often just design while I code. So I build the feature, and then I try it out and I'm like, oh, this is shit. And then I change the UX and I'm like, oh, okay, this works better. But I think it comes from like a lot of trial and error and rapid iteration. Like sometimes I think we've annoyed like a lot of our users when we change the UI sometimes. And sometimes like we often are very scared of touching it or changing it, but it's really good just to learn. Like I've learned a ton from doing big changes that we probably should not have done.
Okay.
And so it really helped. Like it's kind of weird of doing so much trial and error with design. So that kind of helped really shape V2, how we kind of built it. It also helps because we have a much clearer picture of like where we're going. So it helps a lot in shaping up the product versus being in kind of like a weird teenager phase where you're still trying to figure out how you're going to look like, how it's going to work in the future.
Yeah, and like whenever you test the new UI, do you do it in like closed beta environment, or do you do it like on, on the production to all users?
No, well, it'll be like, first we'll kind of do a quick mock-up on Figma. Like it's actually rare we do very high fidelity designs in Figma, just enough that we understand like the surface area that we need to build for and the different use cases. Then we'll go in the UI, we'll build a few versions, we'll give it to the team and they'll try it out. And then after that, I mean, it's lunch.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, so for V2, I mean, we've been trying it out for like the past 3 or 4 months. Like everyone on the team switched to V2 and we've all been trying it out internally. And it's very useful to have a team that like everyone at Zapper uses Zapper because we're all, degens. And so it really helps that everyone is a user. So we're able to pick some things up before we launch versus nobody using it. And then your instinct will kind of always be off in that case. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of we're a startup, we're 30 people. And so we don't have like these heavy processes for design, which I think are pretty good to be agile and flexible.
Yeah, like that's the thing that I'd like to ask you about, because you've grown from like 1 person to 30 person. And I'm wondering like what has changed in terms of managing company? Because like in like Web 2, Web 1 space, it's pretty obvious, like you have playbooks, but in crypto, like people experiment with different, managerial design. So I'm wondering like how it works in Zapper.
So before I talk about how it is at Zapper, I'll tell you about what it's not. So from our, like a lot of engineers we've hired and myself all had, issues and were annoyed by, more of the corporate software rhythm of things. And I think like one thing that really I could never wrap my head around was that I felt like I was blocked to push improvements. It was like we had so many artificial barriers to ship. It was completely crazy. And there's so much wasted potential on the teams I worked with. That's like, you imagine like this all potential energy that never turns into kinetic energy. It's just wasted, And it's crazy how much like we created these huge barriers. And it was just like a frustration, because then you understand why, some more corporate environments, like a lot of fan companies end up that way. You have to be stable at all times. But it kind of feels like we instead of going in the middle, we just went the complete opposite. It was a frustration for a lot of people that joined Zapper. When I first started hiring, I was like, this should never turn into a, corporate development environment, making sure that everyone feels like all their potential energy is turned into kinetic energy, that they're not blocked of doing something, to really make sure we kind of keep that engineering culture. And I guess that's why we've kind of been known traditionally to be like people that ship very fast. Yeah, there's going to be bugs. Like there's trade-offs in everything. Typically, we've been very on the like ship to prod mentality. Now we're becoming a bit better because we did introduce like some regressions a few times. And so we're just finding a better way to maintain that. But like the real important thing is making sure that everyone doesn't feel like blocked or doesn't feel like their potential is being wasted. Like there's nothing more demotivating than feeling like you're not being leveraged to your full abilities in a job, right?
And like, how do you do it in practice? Do you just have some processes that let people be more independent when it comes to shipping, or Are there some rules that, make it more easy for people to deliver?
Yeah, well, it's more so kind of like the anti-fragile philosophy, where if you create barriers, like, so something I realized was that a lot of devs aren't good at QA because there's always someone to QA for them. So they never develop that muscle. It's like an atrophied muscle that they're never using. And so obviously they're going to be shit at doing QA if they never do it. And so often a lot of companies will be like, oh, we need to hire a bunch of QAs. So you're kind of not helping. And typically a lot of people that devs at startups or founders that are developers are pretty good at QA because there's no QA to help them. Like, they have to learn the hard way how to test stuff and how to envision like problems that can surface. And so in practice, what that means is, well, we don't have a QA at Zapper. Not saying that we're never going to have one, but we don't have one. There's probably things that could help by having one for sure. But it did help train that muscle. Like, we also have an emphasis on code responsibility, in the sense that you're responsible for the code you ship and you judge if, you should have a second pair of eyes to look at it. Like, putting more trust in your team has yielded good results. I mean, it's obviously not like there's always trade-offs, like someone just pushing code and then it breaks something. But then the lessons you learn there kind of prepares you later. So that's kind of been our model. We'll see how it scales. But yeah, I think we have to be careful in building our teams. And sometimes, as I said, if your first reflex when there's things that break, or like people that don't test enough, is hiring a QA, or you're not solving the underlying issue.
It sounds like you screen for a big sense of ownership of the things that you put out. Yeah, I'm wondering, because like Zapper, as you said at the start, you kind of like surfed the DeFi wave and you had like a perfect timing. And I'm wondering, how have you dealt with acquiring new users back then and how it looks like now? What has changed in these 2 years?
So one realization that I've made, so I've had startups before that failed for very different reasons. And the way I kind of thought about growth changed a lot. First, I saw growth as a function of building a great product. And while that is true, it's not the entire truth. The best predicament of growth is the market. There's nothing else that will be a better predictor of future growth than the market itself. And so if you can identify a market that has high growth potential, you'll have way more, growth potential than just focusing on the product. And so, but when you do both at the same time, then it's kind of like even better, right? And so the first part was for me learning how to identify, like there's a essay from Paul Graham that's about how to find startup ideas or how to find, new things to build. And the number one thing, like takeaway, was like identifying small markets that you think will be huge in the future. And for me, that was DeFi. It was like this, I knew that it was going to be huge in the future. I didn't know when, I just knew it was going to be huge in the future. And in fact, it became huge much faster than what I imagined. Like I thought I'd have like much more time to build Zapper. And the only way that I could tell that it would be huge was they're kind of like a perfect storm of like my previous experiences in finance and software. But the biggest thing was me becoming like a obsessive user and noticing that a lot of the people around me were going all in that path. And like, there's a lot of parallels I see with NFTs as well. Like it's exactly the same thing where people become obsessed with it. It's not like people try it and then just leave. Like bull markets will do that, but like there's always an underlying core of people that will stick no matter what. And that was it for DeFi. So it gave me a lot of confidence in what I was building. And then it's let me use products in this market that have great potential that I know are going to be big in the future and try to notice the problems I have. And so one of the problems was tracking things. And then I was like, well, if tracking things is a big problem right now, and this is a market that's going to explode in the future, well, this seems like a pretty good bet. And so started focusing on that. And then obviously it wasn't like a master 5D chess plan on my part. Like a lot of it is gut and instinct. One thing that did catch me by surprise was the kind of network effects that help us ride the DeFi wave even better was that the more complex DeFi got, the more protocols appeared, the more Zapper became an important product. And every time we added a new integration, it was like a gateway, to a new community because people were like really happy. Then the network effects became more important. Like initially it was like, Aave's on Zapper. That's great. But then it became like, oh shit, like this new protocol is on Zapper. That's great. Like I'm going to try out Zapper. You're super happy that, another product supports your protocol. And then with time, that product like Zapper becomes more relevant. And so when it builds a new protocol, you're like, oh my God, this is great. And so it kind of like created that feedback loop. And that's something I didn't really anticipate, or I knew that we had a good shot at gaining good market share, but I didn't really think that would be the way of kind of building those native network effects.
It sounds like your main user acquisition channel was like this business development, because like technically speaking, it was business development because you get like partnership.
Yeah, unintentional business development.
Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, how have you done it? How you decided which protocol do you want to integrate, and like whether you talked with the founders of the protocol and asked them for some specs, or was it more like you just said, okay, this protocol makes sense and we'll do it ourselves?
Yeah, well, it's a good question. So initially I had a lot of conversations with other founders, like in the very early time, like Stani, it would be like, could you add Aave to Zapper? Or like Robert Leshner was like, could you add this to Compound? And then I would just do it. But those were in like the ones with the most network effects. The ones with the most network effects was like, there's this new farm right now called Yam. Everyone's in it and no one can see what the hell's going on. And so supporting that farm on Zapper like instantly was amazing for growth. And then adding every single farm the moment they appeared was great for growth, because also yield farming is like, there's something addicting about seeing your claimable rewards go up, right? And so I'd say that was the most important thing that helped us capture these network effects. In fact, like it was really during yield, DeFi summer that we really grew the most because of yield farming. It's like our product was perfectly positioned for that market, and the fact that we were very quick, like it was instantly available on Zapper, like the moment the farm appeared. And that definitely helped us a lot.
And how have you tracked all these farms? Did you do it yourself, or did you have some degens, full-time degens looking for farms for you?
I'd say it's like 3 or 4 solid degens on the team that, we're all in all the farms anyways. And almost at the time, like the farms were launched, like we were in them. And so it really helped. There's also like a time where, I was obsessively on DeFi Twitter because it was just so fun. And you heard about rumors that a new yield farm would appear. And so we would get ready and add it. Like it was a lot of fun. But yeah, I think it's because we're kind of just users as well. We're just, farming.
And do you have any other user acquisition strategies right now? Some main ones that you use?
Yeah, well, right now, there's a lot of them. Obviously, there's still the protocol integration one. Like every time you integrate a new protocol, it exposes us to a new part of the community. But one I'm most excited about is around NFTs and DAOs and turning up that network effect of people. Like, because the more people you follow on Zapper that you're interested in, the better your experience is going to be as we roll out new features. But like if I follow someone, when I browse a collection, I can instantly see if that person I follow is an owner of that collection. So it's like a social queue.
Oh, okay.
And like the more people you follow, like the better the experience is. Like there's one time, like I was wondering if I should invest in an NFT collection or like buy an item. And I follow like almost all the top collectors. If you want to see, you can just look at my account on Zapper. And I saw that nobody was kind of in that collection. So I was like, it's either I'm very, very early before all the top collectors, which would be like a lot of luck, or, there's something that's probably not great about this collection, or something that's not, So anyway, things like that definitely help. And then it's about, looking at markets that are small right now, that there's no players that you think are going to be big in the future. like DAO tracking, seeing who's part of a DAO.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's not a lot of products. It's a small market that not a lot of people are paying attention to. Like there was a huge wave of hype around DAOs like 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like a lot of people just abandoned, But I mean, there's still a lot of DAO startups or DAO tooling, but identifying problems in small markets that you think can be pretty big in the future. Like I'm fairly confident that DAOs will be in orders of magnitude larger, and the need to, it's like you can think of them as like Facebook groups with a bank account. And so the need to browse Facebook groups and to know in which Facebook group you want to be in is going to be much bigger in the future. So it's kind of setting Zapper up to solve that future use case in the best way possible. Obviously, the problem might be, solutions might be very different, but the problem is the same. Just like the problem of viewing your own, what's in your wallet is difficult and will be true later.
Yeah, I really like this social element because it's like whenever I look at Twitter, and I run this podcast for some time, and I have many requests. Like people want to put, like some PR agencies tell me, oh yeah, we want to put our client. And like the thing that I do always is I look at their Twitter profile and I look whether people I follow them as well. So just like you've done it with NFTs, it's like this first layer of due diligence. So I think it's going to be huge. So I guess like you really made a heavy bet on this product-led growth, where you just like create features that have this growth component, this virality component inside. So you don't need to spend that much on like, I don't know, Facebook ads or like whatever.
Yeah, I think a lot of founders overrate marketing way too much, or like paid ads. Like it's more often it's to mask something that's not working in your product. Like you'll use marketing to kind of pad your stats or help, or you assume that it's the only thing, like you need marketing. And I'm not saying you don't need it, but in a startup that's trying to find product market fit, focusing on marketing is probably like one of the biggest startup killers, because until you find product market fit, you don't want any noise in the signal that could potentially help you find product market fit. And marketing is noise, just like, a lot of DeFi protocols that focused on, incentives to bring people in. That's noise in trying to find, like, building a good product. A very few amount of protocols that had incentives like are in a better situation today. It's like they kind of wasted their money on marketing by issuing tokens to people that just dumped. And so I think we tend to if you're able to be in a position where your product grows itself, like it's almost that you should aim for when building. Like obviously it'll be different based on the industry. Like if you're in a unbounded or a market, or a bounded market, like it's very different. Like crypto is an unbounded market, which is great because there's no limit to what it can grow, versus like a fintech company that's in Europe, like that's dependent on regulation, like that's in a bounded market. So like figuring out like what type of market you're operating in, like who's your customer, will help dictate what's your kind of product market fit like ideal.
And I'm wondering, because we talk a lot about like successes of Zapper, and I'm sure that V2 will be a huge success, but like what has been the biggest fuck ups that you had in Zapper so far?
Yeah, we've had a few, like obviously like all startups. I think there's some like features that we should have turned off a long time ago that we kind of kept alive. One difficulty that we've always had was like what the strategy we do with Zaps. Like they've played a critical role of Zapper initially. And we've always kind of assumed that Zaps would play a role in Zapper in the future. We quickly realized that it was very hard to scale. Like we had 400 smart contracts on different chains, some that had vulnerabilities that we had to turn off, and it was like really hard to manage. And we're building a custom one for every protocol. And it was like very, very unscalable. And it was becoming harder and harder to figure out how to, leverage it in the product. And so we took the decision too late. Well, we could have done it earlier, but like we spent a lot of energy and effort trying to maintain it and improve it when we could have pulled the trigger. What's hard is also some users really like it, and it is very useful. And I mean, they still exist. They'll have like their own legacy section on Zapper, but like things like that. Also, there was a point last year where we decided to turn on fees, and immediately went back on our decision like 2 days later, saying that it's not the right time for us. Things like that, I'd say. I'm trying to think of others. Like there's hiring, but like those are typical, like hiring too quickly.
Yeah.
Those are, things that a lot of startups kind of go into. Like they're like, oh, I need people. And then you just end up hiring too much.
Yeah.
That's a very common mistake. It's usually much better to be very slow and, your hair is on fire and you're running around trying to, put out the fire than, being like an architect that's like, oh, we're going to do this. So we need 5 people. So we're going to hire 5 people right now. Like it's much better to be in the situation where we absolutely need people that even though it sounds counterintuitive, it's much better to wait till your hair is on fire to hire someone.
And I'm wondering, like, because we talked about fees, and I'm wondering, like, how does Zapper earn money and how does it plan to earn money in the future?
So we just started making, well, that's not totally true. Before I go there, there's 3 ways where we plan on making revenue. First is through transaction fees. It's probably the most obvious one. The second one is through our API. And so people could leverage Zapper to build their tax tool or whatever. Eventually have these plugins built directly on top of Zapper that people can download. And then the third one is through more of like a cosmetics on Zapper. Like you imagine like skins in League of Legends. So these little things that we plan to build like a community economy around. So those are probably the 3 axes that we're planning to build around. So we've started, working on our API, like our enterprise API. This is something that we didn't want to productize yet, but like the market kind of forced us to build a product out of it because it's been so requested. People are kind of like begging to pay for it. So usually that's a good sign that there's business potential. And so we decided to do it. So that's the first one. We turned it on last month and we're taking our time to figuring out a good way to monetize. We're not in a rush, but like, I think the bear market that we're currently experiencing is like a perfect opportunity for that, to kind of experiment on these different mechanisms.
Yeah, I think it will be more honest, the signal that you get, because like in bull market, when there was a bull market, I could pay sometimes big fees, even though like they didn't make sense economically. But I felt, everything is growing, so I don't mind paying 200 for Ethereum gas. But like right now, I'm like, oh, it's $10. I don't know. Maybe I'll wait until it gets to 5. So if you get the fees right now, I think it will be more sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, definitely.
Seb, like we are getting till the end, and I have a few questions that I always ask. And, the first one is, if you had a magic wand and could fix one thing about Web3, what would you fix?
That's a very good question. I think there's a few things. So I'd fix something that's outside of Web3. Like I'm not really answering your question, but like if I had a magic wand, I'd kind of like remove the baggage that people have on crypto, because people are kind of still stuck to cryptocurrency and then Bitcoin and proof of work. So that would be the first thing. I kind of like, just so people could view Web3 from a new lens and kind of remove like these things will take time. Like technology moves fast, but culture doesn't necessarily move as fast. Like it does move fast, but sometimes not as fast as the technology itself. Like a lot of gamers that hate NFTs because like from their perspective, and it makes total sense that, it's kind of like the evil capitalist evolution of, pay to win and, in-game purchases, which from their perspective makes absolutely like total sense. Like I would absolutely hate NFTs. And so it would probably be that. Then the thing in Web3 itself is there are a few patterns that I'm seeing where we tend to go for, like protocols will take, centralized approaches, which I think is not great. I think like one thing I'd remove a lot is a lot of the tribalism that I see, because it is masking a lot of our judgment. Like as much as we want, like to think we're not biased, like we all are. So that's probably something I would remove. So I guess it's more like not necessarily from a tech perspective, but more in like the perception. Because from a builder perspective, want to build cool use cases regardless of the technology. Obviously, I've grown attached to Ethereum, but it's important not to kind of lose sight of what's really important. It's not your bags, right? It's of creating an accessible and open financial system, making people have access to the decentralized economy, bring more people in to help them build wealth in more sustainable ways where their central bank can't take money out of their pocket. The banks can't take money out of their pocket. So I think like those would probably be the things, more like perception.
Yeah. Like regarding this perception, I had this insight some time ago that if you are a Web3 builder, you grow very thick skin because so many people tell you that you're a scammer, Ponzi schemer. Many people from Web2 tech that you respect, you watch them on, I don't know, YC Startup School or like wherever.
Yeah.
And they write on Twitter like, this is a scam, this is bullshit. And you need to build despite that. And I think Web3 builders will be this generation of builders that are going to be very, very independent when it comes to judgment, because, otherwise they wouldn't build in the first place.
Yeah, no, that's a pretty good insight. Like just think about, say, a founder that's been building SaaS tech products. It's not like controversial in society to build SaaS, SaaS startups. But if you go in crypto as a founder, like you have to be contrarian, you have to be against the grain in some way. You have to have thick skin. Like I don't people say to SaaS founders, like one token all the time, or put pressure on them, right? Yeah, that definitely is a pretty good insight.
Yeah. So like, what were the most mind-blowing projects that you have seen? It's going to be something that surprised you, made you smile. It might not have any sense, like practical sense, but was like super creative and, something that just blew your mind.
That's a good question. I tend to gravitate towards things that I find weird or like that we think are very stupid ideas, but have like very interesting kind of repercussions about the future. So some of them is like NFTs, renting them like to use as your profile picture. Like I think it sounds very stupid, but it might have I think it's the kind of thing that with time, you only kind of really know if it's smart or not. I mean, it's not like mind blowing, but I think like these type of things that are pretty interesting. One thing I thought was super cool was, I think it was in Decentraland. I don't remember which project, but like there's someone that bought plot in front of a NFT project that had a party, and I bought the lot to build a billboard on top of it. So I thought that was like very smart and interesting use case for advertisement, like knowing that a lot of people would go to a party and the lot in front, you buy a lot because you want to speak to them. Like I thought it was super creative. I don't know what the conversion was on that, but like I think that's super cool. Yeah, I'm also like a huge fan of, in my spare time, like a few months back, like I did generative art, just playing around with it. I find it really fascinating because there's the art itself, but also how you generate it. Like if you look at like the generative art communities, like knowing how like these things were generated, I think is very interesting because you're like, oh wow, like there's like elegance in the art and elegance in like the code, like the solution that brought the art to life. And I think it's kind of something that people overlook when looking at generative art. It's like a lot of them is as if, you painted this incredible painting, but using like your toes in some way. Like people are very creative and they like constrain themselves into kind of like delivering like awesome art. I think that's really mind blowing as well. And I think like NFTs, like generative art has existed for a long time, but it feels like the NFTs are the perfect way to kind of encapsulate it and broadcast it and distribute it. But yeah, I think it's also like I've been trying to identify building a thesis around generative art because I've really sucked at investing in generative art. First, because I see it as an investment, which I probably shouldn't. But like there are communities that are pretty good like at finding out which collections have potential. And it's very different than PFPs. I'm going on a tangent, but anyway. It's very different than PFPs in the sense that, like, when you think about Fidenzas and why they became so popular, it's really hard to, imagine like imagine why. But there are things like, if you look at, say, when there's a new art block created, and it's like, when you look at it, you're like, oh, it reminds me of this, it reminds me of that, or it kind of looks like a fidenza. That's generally, like, my point is kind of a detractor from investing in it. But when you look at a fidenza, you're like, it's a fidenza. There's nothing else to compare it to. And so it's identifying these things. Like if you look at a collection, you're like, oh, it reminds me of all these 15 other things that have existed before. I find that like that I'm trying to develop more of like an eye to that. But again, like it's very hard to know. Like nobody has a crystal ball, but that's what I've seen like some communities kind of doing. I mean, for PFPs as well, like the ones that succeeded all set a precedent for like when Goblins launched, there's a bunch of Goblin derivatives, and it kind of painted for a new type of art style and way to build storytelling for an NFT project. So like things that kind of set a precedent for others, I think are important to look at.
Fidenzas are like, Salvador Dali or Andy Warhol's painting. Like, it's Dali, it's Warhol, like in a second. And here it's the same. And I think like you highlighted the code that creates the art. And it's as if you had this like genius engineer that builds a machine that makes a painting, and you don't know what's more exciting, the machine or the painting, because both of these things are equally impressive to create.
Yeah, and there's a really good book on this. It's called Hackers and Painters. Anyway, like it's from Paul Graham, and he talked about how it's weird that we see code and art as two branches of completely separate types of people when they're in fact very, very close to each other. It's just the medium is different. Instead of a paintbrush, it's a keyboard and a mouse. And the rest is your imagination. Like you can think of a new product to build and it's in your head, and you use your tools as a way to convey that to the world. It's just a more explicit message because it's a product versus art, which is it's not explicit.
Yeah, it's more like useful because art doesn't need to be useful at all.
Yeah.
Okay, and like, what has been the funniest thing that happened to you during these years in Web3? Something that made you laugh out loud, LOL, or like, something super, super funny.
Well, it's not really funny, but fun. My week at NFT NYC was like, I was blown away by the experiences I had. I didn't go to the conference, but I went to all the side events, and I was like really just blown away by what I saw. Like it felt like going to a Disneyland as a kid in a way. Like going to these different events and communities, like what they did is really amazing. Like I had so much fun. Went there with some folks from Zapper, and when they came back, they all kind of like, I don't know, it's hard to describe. Like it was really a great week. Probably one of the most fun weeks I had in crypto. Funniest thing. Like off the top of my head, I don't have anything, but I just recalling like DeFi summer, like just being really fun. It was like this video game that we were playing, this MMORPG that we are all playing together, kind of all new. It's like that it didn't make sense, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, like, for me, like crypto Twitter is the funnest place I've been on the whole internet. And I've been on the internet, for over 20 years, but crypto Twitter is just like comedy club all the time. Yeah. So
yeah. One thing I love about like Web3 crypto Twitter is it's making like the internet fun again, in my opinion. Like there's, you had early 2000s internet, which is, I recall as a kid being really fun, and like websites being very weird, like it's stupid, and like just like more of a, community, or like, and then there's kind of like the corporatization of the internet with like all the SaaS copycats and the big social media. And then every website was like a WordPress template, and it kind of like everything looked the same. And then with, Web3, like just the yield farms, like all the UI kind of looked like games. Like a lot of NFT websites are fun, like just NFTs in themselves. Like some are absolutely ridiculous, like crypto dick butts, like, like these things. Yeah, it's just making, the web fun again.
It's like a giant playground. And also like, people have so much distance. I remember this guy on Twitter that just posted a screenshot from his Binance account, and he lost like $5 million in a year. and he just said, "Hi Binance, can I get a refund?" And, like, and this
God.
kind of like people when they trade stocks, they don't do this kind of stuff because they are very like ego invested. Oh my God, like how is your portfolio performing? And it's kind of like measuring their dicks. But like in crypto, it's people just make memes whenever they lose 50%, they just shitpost, and this is it.
Yeah, and we make fun of ourselves. Like we'll share our really bad trades.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So like I have like two last questions because this episode will get out after the version 2 is out because we don't want to, spoil the start of the product. So I'm wondering where people might find more info about Zapper. Like where should they go? Should they go to Twitter, Discord, website, or is there any other place?
Twitter would probably be the best place to start. Our Discord as well. Our community will open their arms to anyone that joins. And our website, obviously, at zapper.fi.
Okay, so I have last question that I always ask, and it's, do you have any ideas of other builders that might be a good fit for the conversation that we had, that could share, they already built something, they got some traction, maybe not such impressive as yours, but it will be okay as well. But people who could share some really nice insights from the trenches.
Yeah, there's one product that I think is pretty cool that I've been trying out their beta. I think it'd be good to have the insights from a starting founder. It's called Interface. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's like an activity feed. It's on iOS, which I think they've done a pretty good job. I think it'd be pretty interesting to have their insights and also have insights from a founder that's starting their journey.
Yeah. Like I try to balance it and have, both established people like you, or, I had like Chris from Hop Protocol. I had, Dennis from Tally. And now my plan is to get more like a starting founder for my next 2 guests. So try to balance it out. Okay. So like said, like, thanks a lot. And like, see you on Twitter. I will definitely use Zapper a lot. Also because actually by preparing for this meeting, I opened Zapper because I haven't looked on it for a long time because I didn't want to see, my portfolio. And I found $500 on my wallet. Because
wow.
I was like, it turned out that I had it on Binance Smart Chain. I have no idea how it ended up there, but it was some stupid trade going on some shitcoin. And I was like, damn, I found it $500. So it's good to, take a look at your Zapper.
So I think we figured out our business model. Because we found money that you didn't know existed, we should keep 50%.
Yeah, it might work. Yeah. Yeah, but, like this wow experience that you give to users. Like it's like, finding $500 in your pocket. Like I've never had it, but here I found it. So this is super cool.
Yeah.
So Seb, like, thanks a lot and see you later.
Thank you.